Hi, everyone. It's John here from Hot Take Hockey, joined by the absolute legend, Canuck Clay, big Vancouver Canucks fan. I'm sure you guys have seen him on the channel before. Clay, we're going to get into this first video, this first topic on Pettersson and Hughes. I mean, all of Canucks Nation has been talking about it, what these contracts will look like. So that's exactly it. We're going to predict those contracts. We're going to talk about these two players going into a new year and new contracts. So, Clay, how you been doing? And what are your thoughts on this initially on this Hughes and Pettersson contract situation?
Well, John, thank you. From one wannabe legend to an actual legend, I appreciate you having me on, and I appreciate how good you're always to me, whether it's pumping out my channel or giving me some little technical, low-key technical advice. You've always been great. You know who doesn't need advice is Pettersson and Hughes and their agents. I think they are. It's tricky because they're the two, obviously, you know this, and I've heard you talk about this. They're the two franchise players that we've never had a center. Like we've had Bure, who's good. We've had Sedin, who's very cerebral, but we've never had a guy like PD and Quinn Hughes. We've never had a number one defenseman with at least his potential, regardless of the rough seasons they had last year. I know we're going to talk about all that. So to start this off, and you can tell I'm excited to talk about this because we want it done. Two franchise players. PD has a bit more leverage because of his contract situation. He has arb rights and he can be offer sheeted, which I don't think will happen. But Hughes actually has less leverage. His only leverage is to really hold out until as long as he can. So we're nervous here in Vancouver, but not so much. I think we still have 2 more weeks before training camp. If we get together in 2 weeks and they're still not signed, I'm probably going to have an accident in my underwear, but we'll worry about that later.
Well, yeah, a lot of Canucks fans, I would say all Canucks fans are worried about this and stressed about this. And I've been listening to Elliot Friedman and seeing a bunch of different stuff being said, and kind of what you said. I think the leverage is a lot more there for PD. And I think the direction, it seems like from what a lot of people are saying, is PD's probably going to head towards a shorter term deal. Yeah. And Hughes is potentially, they're looking for the term. They're looking for a longer term deal. So let's jump right into it, Clay. I'm sure a lot of people want to hear what you have to say.
And just before you ask me the question, because I want to say this before I forget, what's interesting, John, is before the Canucks made all their moves of buying out Virtanen, buying out Holtby, trading Nate Schmidt and his big salary, and then that massive trade right to Arizona, but we got a big contract back. Before we did all that, we were thinking, man, we don't have any money. It's going to be short term for PD, 3 years, short term for Hughes, 3 or 4, as long as they don't get to free UFA. But now with the found money with Michael Furlan and LTIR, we're talking about 16 million between the two of them. And I know that's what we're going to get into, who's long, who's short, but at least maybe one goes long and one goes short as opposed to 2 short. We'll see.
Yeah, and I think that will play into both our predictions on the cap space for sure. Yeah. And of course, I mean, it depends on the Canucks if they want to fill that whole 23 roster. And of course, I think a lot of Canucks fans, the criticism towards Benning or the frustration was you're signing Pullman and you're signing Hamonic and you're signing all these guys before even dealing with these contracts, right? Yeah. So I think that was also the frustration too. So Clay, I guess I'll let you go first. And do you want to start with, I mean, you could just say both your Pettersson and Hughes predictions, but if you want to go into one.
Yeah, let's build it up. Let's do PD together first. Okay.
Okay.
So I think we agree that if it's going to be likely be short term, so 3 years, you don't want 4 because that takes them to unrestricted free agency. So let's say a 3-year deal. The 2 comparables I hear a lot, John, in this market are Matt Barzal, who's actually from Vancouver. Yep. And Braden Point's first contract, not his new one. Barzal gets $7 million over 3 years. Point made 6.75 over his second contract over his 3 years. You could argue that PD is more valuable. Well, Tampa, everyone's so good there, and Barzal's very valuable. But given everything I said, I'm going to go a tiny bit over what Barzal's making. So knowing that I have to stay within 16 million between the two of them, I'm going to give 7.5 to PD over 3 years total. So 22.5 over 3.
See, Clay, you must have been looking at my notes because that's essentially what I have. I have the 3-year deal at, and my range was, again, depending on Hughes, and we're going to get into the Hughes comparables. Yeah. Pettersson's probably going to fall. And I mean, you have to also consider, and this is a big discussion too, the Kotkaniemi offer sheet that was just handed, 6.1, right? Pettersson looks at that and goes, I shouldn't even be close to that guy, you know? Right. So I think it's at the very minimum 7.5. I think right now it's holding off because I think Pettersson probably wants that 8. So I'm saying in around 7.5 to 8, but I'm saying it ends up at the higher amount. So I'll be the hot take guy here, and I'll say 3 years at 8 mil.
I like it, John. It's bold. I love the way you said that former Montreal player, now Carolina Hurricanes player's name, because every time I say it, it sounds like I'm saying a body part or a swear. So you said it very well, and it flowed very well.
Thank you. And I think the other thing to consider is, while there's different comparables, like you talked about the center comparables, but there's other guys that have been in the situation, like Laine, for example. He did that exact thing. Like he's been on 2 or 1 year deals too, right? And it just becomes that, like, okay, are you going to lock this guy up for 10 mil, 11 mil on a long-term deal, or are you going to risk it? And again, yeah, I would say the shorter term deal is smart for both sides here, because if you're the Canucks perspective here, you're hoping the cap goes up in 3 years significantly, right? So by the time that cap comes up and the contract's over, then you're hoping you can give them that 10 or 11 and not completely destroy your team. So
great point.
I think that's the perspective there. So we're kind of on the same page. I'd say a 3-year deal. It makes sense with the avoiding the UFA status, and somewhere between 7.5 and 8. So I think we're on the same page. So now it gets interesting. So bouncing off of that, Quinn, Hughes, Clay, and I think other people have to consider this too, and maybe we consider this. Do you think that it's just as simple as these 2 guys getting signed, or do you think the Canucks, like Benning, have to make another deal where it's like trading a guy or creating some like a little bit amount of space because Pettersson wants that extra 500K or extra mil, or Hughes wants that extra mil? So kind of feed into that mindset also, if you could.
Excellent point. So if Petey gets what you suggested, closer to 8 as opposed to mine 7.5, and if Hughes comes in around 8, which we'll talk about, then you're basically right up against the cap, and that includes Michael Furlan's LTIR, right? Which is unfortunate, but we know that he's not going to play again, which is really too bad. So does Benning have another move? Well, you know, he can save 100, 200 grand here and there, depending on who he sends down, right? To Abbotsford. I almost said Utica, down to Abbotsford. So there's all this minutia, but I think in my heart of hearts, if I know he has 16 million, and if you have 8, I have 7.5 for PD. Here's the thing with Hughes, he's always lumped into this big 4 of Dahlin, Heiskanen, and Makar. And we know Heiskanen and Makar, they got big ones, right? Heiskanen is 8.45 over whatever, 6 or 7, and Makar is 9 over.
You could even throw the Shabbat comparable as well, 8 million on a long-term deal. Perfect.
Okay, so thank you for stacking the deck against me. So now we got 3 guys that are making between 8 and 9 million. And then Dahlin, he's still going to be good. The poor guy's stuck in Buffalo, so maybe he's not the best comparable right now. Then you got, what is it, Seth Jones and Darnell Nurse signing these massive like deals too. So the market for defensemen is really, really growing right now. So before, I thought it was going to be too short-term. I thought PD 7.5 to 8. I thought Hughes 6 to 6.5. They're both done for 14 million on short-term. But Hughes is seeing Heiskanen, seeing Makar get these $8 million deals. And even if you say, well, Hughes isn't as good as them right now, first year he was neck and neck with Makar, regressed a little bit. He still thinks he's good. We know he's good. Yeah. He knows that we need him. So is he worth? Here's the thing, man. We love him here, but there are a lot of people who don't think he's worth 8 years at 8 million.
I think it's the defensive issues. I think it's the concern that, okay, you're looking at these other guys like Miro Heiskanen. He can be a much better defender, like a much better defensive defenseman. But you also have to consider, and people need to consider this, that Heiskanen's never going to probably produce offensively close to what Hughes does, right?
Right.
So it's like you're getting your positive in one aspect, you're getting your negative. Like, I just think, yes, it's a massive risk, but for a guy like Quinn Hughes, they don't grow on trees. So that's where I'll let you make your prediction. But if it's in around the comparable, if it's under that Cale Makar amount, you have to make that bet that maybe now it's a massive risk, but that in 3-4 years, as I said, with the cap going up, you have to make that bet that it's going to be a massive piece for your team, a franchise player for your team, and that it's going to work out in the long run.
Right. Okay. Do you want to go first on this one, or you want me to go first?
You can go first again, Clay. Go for it.
Okay. So this one, I'm torn. I would love him to come in at 7.5, same as PD, but for 8 years. But I don't think that's going to happen, especially now that Heiskanen is making 8.45 and Makar is making 9. I don't think he's going to make that much money, but I think he's going to be close. So, man, I think he's going to go 7 or 8 years at 8 to 8.25.
Yeah, I think that's fairly accurate. I think I don't see a scenario where he's touching the 9. I really don't. I don't think the Canucks can budge on that. Cale Makar has done what he's done. And I think while there was a legitimate debate to put Hughes there with Makar for that Calder, and I think there's been a legitimate case for Hughes being maybe not at that Makar complete tier, but like right there with the younger defensemen in the top 5 for younger defensemen coming up. So it's a scenario where he's close to there. And as you kind of mentioned, so the Heiskanen comparable, the Chabot comparable, I think what you said, I think he fits right in between there. And I think Chabot's contract was signed a little bit before all these defensemen have come through. So I think he either gets what you said, the 8.25, or I think he close to matches Heiskanen's. So I will say 8.3 to 8.4 long-term for Quinn Hughes.
Awesome. So if you take your high end at 8.4 and PD at 8, I don't know if they have 16.4. So they might have to make a small move, as you suggested a few minutes ago. That's a good point.
So that's where I'm saying I wonder if PD would agree. Again, it would have to be such a, like, it's so sketchy, Clay, because it's similar with, like, you see the line A and you see like all of that. Like, would PD take a bet on himself for like I don't even know if the Canucks would do it, like on a 1-year contract, like a solid like 1-year contract, $7 million. See if he explodes even more, but that's such a risk for the Canucks. It's such a risk. So that's where it's like, if you can make a move, I mean, the absolute hot take, and it would save Canucks fans misery, would be bye-bye Tyler Myers.
Yes. And that's $6 million. You're right. It was a guy like Nate Schmidt who made 5.9, basically $6 million, that we had such high hopes for. Didn't work out. Ended up getting a 3rd round pick back. No, obviously not the same pick, but the same area. But yeah, you're right. That is the biggest move next is Tyler Myers still has a few more years with that big, and you could arguably get a much cheaper player to do the same type of work for sure.
So I think we can agree the best case scenario here would see Pettersson sign. I mean, at that 16 mark we said would be Pettersson sign a 3-year deal at about 7.75 per, and see Quinn Hughes sign an 8-year deal at 8.25 per.
And there's our 16 million.
There's your 16 mil
with like 25 cents left.
Yeah. So I think we're all right for our predictions. Honestly, Clay, I would imagine we're going to be pretty close. Maybe $500K apart from what's going to happen, but I think we're pretty close for the predictions. So any other points on the Quinn Hughes, Pettersson contract situation for the Canucks fans stressing out there like you?
Yeah, I think one thing, and I appreciate, I know you have fans from all teams that watch you, but anyone who doesn't know the Canucks well, you may have heard that PD only played half the season last year. So you talked, John, about betting on himself. He, as much as we know how good he is, he won the Calder, right? At the same time, he had a really bad year last year by his standards. He actually picked, for sure. Yeah, he actually picked it up as the second, third, or maybe the end of the first half of the season started.
But then for a bit there, he was struggling badly. Like a lot of Canucks fans were ripping him bad online. You're
right. First 10 games, he really struggled. The next 16 games, he was great, point a game, and then he missed the last 30. So he wants to bounce back. Hughes was fine offensively, but not good defensively, like the entire team. So it's fascinating. We're talking about the two guys, two most important guys in our franchise for the Canucks, but two guys that need bounce back years. So how does that play into negotiations? Time only tell.
And just quickly before we wrap it up, because I forgot to mention it, Kaprizov and Tkachuk are also RFAs. They haven't been signed yet. Do you think the Canucks contracts could, like specifically with Pettersson being a forward like them, do you think they could drop like a 4 and then affect the Pettersson contract? Like, do you have a quick mindset on that?
Yeah, great question, John. I've heard people talk about, maybe those 3 guys are kind of waiting to see who goes first.
Yeah.
I think that PD is a better producer than Tkachuk. And I think that Kaprizov had a great year, obviously, as the very old rookie. The guy's almost as old as me, but I think his sample size is quite small still. So, and they're both wingers, right? Not centers.
PD's as centers, which is seen as more valuable for sure.
Yeah. So if I had to rank, not rank them, I think PD still should come in a tiny bit higher. Yeah.
I mean, I just think, yeah, the only thing I would say on that aspect, I agree with you, PD being more established at this point.
Yep.
Well, not established, but more than Kaprizov, and just the center being much more valuable. I think the difference there is we have like the PD and Hughes. I think the Kaprizov one's a whole different one because he's trying to be recognized as like the face of the Minnesota Wild, so
right,
like by himself. So that's a whole other dilemma, but
good points.
Good discussion. I think it's going to be tough. It's going to be right down to the wire. And I mean, I think Canucks fans are holding their breath like from now till training camp to see if these contracts can get done, because we've seen some players hold out into the training camp and into the season. So hopefully Hughes and Pettersson are not those guys.
And you're right, Matt. And this is the story that's going to be on every Canucks fan's mind for the next 2.5 weeks. And honestly, and you can appreciate this as a YouTube content creator, I could talk about anything on my channel, but as long as I type in ELIAS Pettersson contract, Quinn Hughes contract in the searchable tags, I'm okay.
There you go. All right. I love it. Thank you so much for coming on, Clay. And guys, make sure you go subscribe to Canuck Clay. I definitely will have that kind of tagged at the start of the video and in the description. So go subscribe to him. Let's get him to 10K by end of the year.
Awesome. Keep up the great work, John. Thanks a lot, man.
All right. Drop a like, guys. Leave your thoughts in the comments. And Hughes and Pettersson, we'll see when these guys get locked up.